Welcome to Talmudic Treasures. Today we're learning Sotah page 4, which, as we've been discussing, the notion of a Sotah is a forbidden relationship in which a woman secludes herself with another man and they possibly end up committing adultery. And because of that, the Talmud tells us the following statements. It says that any time a person would decide to pursue after a Isha Zona, a harlot, a prostitute, the Talmud says at the end of that person's days, or in maybe not so much time, mevakish kikar lechem, he's going to end up needing to even beg for bread. In another seemingly unrelated statement, he says that any person who has gasas ruach, which could be literally translated as haughtiness of spirit, but I'd also believe it's similar to someone who has the trait of being a narcissist that only thinks about themselves. On this, it says, Libesov nichshel be'eshes ish, you're going to end up committing adultery, and also ki'ilu ovdavos kachavim. You're going to also, it's like you worshipped idols. And I'd like to say that there's a link between all these different things, because a person who is narcissistic is so self-absorbed, they're only thinking about themselves. So when we say the words avodas kachavim, when we say idol worship, it just really refers to the generic term called avodah zara, a strange form of service. We are supposed to be serving God. And if a person is narcissistic, they cannot think outside of their own life. They're only thinking about their own pleasures. They're only thinking about themselves. They don't care about anything else. And therefore, that certainly is a form of like idol worship. You're serving yourself, which means you're not capable of serving God. And a person who has that narcissistic view doesn't care who he potentially could hurt. He doesn't care that he can destroy his family and he's going to destroy his relationship with his wife by committing adultery, because he's not thinking that far. He's only thinking about himself. And therefore, a person who's narcissistic is going to do whatever he wants, despite what potential downfall may end up happening to him. And that's the reason why, if a person has this approach that all he does is think about himself, eventually you'll stumble with eshes ish, with committing adultery, because there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do it in your mind. Because all I want is to make myself happy, to do things which are best for me. And I don't care if I'm destroying my family. And also, by the way, if she's married, I'm also being involved in her destroying her own family. So a person who has that approach in life, who's a narcissist, doesn't care and doesn't think, and therefore they end up doing these things. Now, ultimately, a person who is not just committing adultery, but a person who has such a dopamine rush by constantly being engaged in these types of behaviors may also gravitate towards nus, to actually purchase for this situation by going after prostitutes and harlots. However, just like any addiction, like this narcissist, he needs that continuous dopamine rush, and therefore he's constantly pursuing for the next pleasure. Because he's constantly doing that, just like a person who unfortunately has other addictions, like drug addictions, all they're thinking about is getting that next high. And therefore, it doesn't matter how much money they spend, nothing else matters except for getting that next high. And therefore, even though this person who would need to pay maybe an absorbent amount of money to continuously feed this addiction of engaging in prostitution and being with these women, eventually he's going to end up running out of all of his money, and he's going to end up being poor and even begging for bread. And therefore, this is what the Talmud is telling us, the tremendous downfall of only thinking about yourself, which is why the entirety of the Torah focuses on chesed, of doing kindness, of how I need to think outside of myself. I need to be able to think of how I can help others, how I can be kind to others. And by doing that, it removes the haughtiness within you and makes you a lot more humble.